Okay, we'll call the special committee of the whole meeting for October 27th to order at 1:01 p.m. Ask for a motion from Councillor Cooey that the committee of the whole adopt the agenda for the special committee of the whole meeting October 27th, 2020 as presented.
I'll give you that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Floor is yours for the next 12 hours, Chris.
12 hours. I don't know if I can talk that long. I'll do my best. So thank you everyone for giving us this time this afternoon. Hopefully we'll give you a good presentation and a summary of what our 2021 operating capital budgets will look like. I'm going to share you a screen with a presentation here to follow along. So we can go through that process. You know, I like making fun of finance to a certain extent because it can be kind of droll and boring at times, but it is an important process that we have to follow. And it isn't rocket science. Our goal is to make it as simple as possible for council and for the public, and make sure that it's easy to understand and it's straightforward in plain language. And while it's complex behind things and how we do transfers and how we generate the revenue, it doesn't have to be that complex when we present that to the public and to council. So today we're going to provide you with a brief summary, and we're going to try and keep to this agenda. I know today is a beautiful day outside at 9 degrees and snow's disappearing, but we're going to try and keep you on focus. We've got 4 hours approximately to try and keep you entertained, and I'll do my best from that perspective. Today's agenda is going to follow this kind of process where I'll probably give a briefing, and then we'll roll into Leanna's role to give you the details on the operating budget and the 10-year capital plan, as well as new initiatives. We are set up to go through the operating budget and capital plan line by line, cost center by cost center, division by division, whichever council's desire is. We can go through it anyway, and we're prepared to do that. At 4 o'clock, if there's any questions that we can't answer, and on the line we have our Director of Corporate Services, Nicole, our Director of Engineering, Parks and Recreation and Operations, Riley, Kara, and Leanna, as well as hopefully she can get into this. But any questions we cannot answer, we have the managers lined up in a lobby at 4 o'clock that we can bring individual managers in and ask individual questions of specific components. And then we'll close off the meeting and start setting what our future dates for the meetings are going to look like as well, and what the consultation process is. So I know I'm going to have lots of cartoons. I sent you out this presentation last night. Lots of cartoons to just keep it light and kind of moving forward in that direction, just to have some jest in it, and to make this important process, and one of our most important processes, a little bit more entertaining and fun than typically happens within organizations. So we've tried to develop our budget based upon, lining up with council's strategic plan. And those are the 5 kind of key pillars that council's adopted, based upon people first, and looking at creating a vibrant community and ensuring our resident safety and balancing responsible growth and providing excellent services. And also maintain the healthy environment. So that's kind of the core at trying to align this up and connect all the dots. And it's funny that this graphic shows dots, but connecting all the dots within the community that's being established, and line that up throughout the organization, from budget and financial planning all the way through to the top level and with council as well. And so this is that main platform that we cascaded down into our budget process to try and line this up as best as possible. And it's still going to be a learning process as we move forward through implementing this plan. So we'll be dealing with it from that perspective. Again, we've tied our strategic plan to council's 5 top strategic priorities. This was changed at the last council meeting where the Southwest berm was removed, which was one of the safety and security priorities within the strategic plan. And these 5 priorities are within the budget. We've got funding available for them, and hopefully we'll get some grant funding to help fill out some other funding deficiencies that we have, especially with the pedestrian bridge feasibility. and we'll see where that takes us going forward. But those all line up to kind of our why, and that's about making a positive difference for the generations to come. And I think that's a really important piece, that this is about the future. Yes, it's about next year, but it's also about the future and laying that foundation of what we're looking forward to through the budget process and financially setting us up for the future. Now, I'm going to take another twist here a little bit and talk about asset management. And asset management is a really important piece to this. This is that replacement of infrastructure that's in the ground right now in the future. And we have infrastructure that is, decades and decades old in the ground that needs to be replaced over time before it starts to fail. And asset management is not a silver bullet to solve all our financial problems or all our infrastructure problems or all the service level problems to the public. It's a process, it's a journey, it takes time, it takes commitment, and it involves everybody. We need to be engaging our staff, council, the public, and making that commitment to move forward an asset management kind of process that supports sustainable service delivery over time. And that's the ultimate goal of asset management, is to get to that sustainable level and to make sure that we can reduce our reliance on grants all the time, that we can be self-funding and self-sufficient, even though that is a daunting task and we will never be finished. And I need to be clear with everybody, we will never be finished fixing infrastructure. It is just a cycle. It goes around and around and around and around. And that's why that graphic there is kind of circular in nature, because it keeps on going, right? As soon as you're finished one thing, you start the cycle all over again. And it's never ending process. But it's an important process. And it's important because that's really the driver of our financial and budget planning process. Without the assets in the ground, we would not, all of us would not have a job here. And we need to manage those assets from that perspective. And so we need to make sure that it's sustainable and that we have a process in place to move forward. And we are on that path. We've done some work. We've got lots of work yet to do, but we're on the right path from that journey. Now, the key thing with asset management is that it needs to provide value, not just to the organization so that it allows us to make good decisions, but to our taxpayers so that they see the value in the services that we're providing, that you can flush your toilet, that you can turn on your tap and the water is safe to drink, that you can drive to work each and every day, that you can walk to work each and every day, that your kids have someplace to play. So there has to be that tangible value when we are talking about asset management that is a return to the organization and to the taxpayers. It also needs to align with all our organizational objectives, and especially that strategic plan. When we talk about people first, asset management fits nicely into that because it's talking about delivering those services to the people first and foremost. We need to be talking about the technical and financial decisions and plans and activities that link all that. And every decision that we make through the budget process impacts people in some form or fashion, be it a cut in level of service, be it an increase in taxes, be it a reduction in taxes. Something impacts them and impacts everybody equally, well, not equally, but proportionally across the entire community. In addition, asset management requires leadership. That's why we're talking about it today. You're the leaders of the community. You've taken this path moving forward on a strategic plan process that incorporates making people first and understanding that leadership is important. Not only that, you made a commitment to workplace culture in this organization. Those are really important factors in realization of the value of our assets within our community. And people are also assets within this organization. The people we have within this town hall, within the operations yard, within the recreation department, within the FCSS office and the library are all assets to the organization. And those are things that we have to put value to it, and has an undetermined value usually with human capacity. And then the other thing that people need to understand is that asset management gives that guarantee, that assurance that you'll always be able to flush your toilet, that you'll always be able to turn on your taps, that your house will have value in the future, that you will have something that you could potentially sell that has that asset return back to yourself as a property taxpayer. So it's all those kind of principles that lead us through the asset management process. Now, why does it matter? The foundation here that we've set through our strategic plan is that people first kind of aspect of things. And one of our key pillars is organizational excellence. We need to continue to provide quality services And we need to get to that sustainable service delivery model. We need to also take the guesswork out of making decisions and setting priorities. Having surety moving forward of what the plan is in the capital side of things gives us surety how we set our tax rates, utility rates in the future, what grants we take advantage of, what we have to lobby at the provincial level and the federal level to get more money to fund infrastructure. It is all those, taking the guesswork out and giving some surety moving forward is a key component of asset management. It also allows us to kind of turn this into a cost-effective and efficient decision-making proactively rather than reactive. Local governments have been great at fixing stuff. We react. When it breaks, we fix it. When there's a pothole, we fill it. But proactively trying to head off when and determining when that infrastructure is going to fail to get the maximum value out is part of that asset management process as well. And we need to efficiently make those decisions proactively as we do the budget process and not be in a reactive and a panic mode whenever something breaks. Everything that we fix, everything that we touch, as council's aware, is expensive. It's not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. So a pool goes down, a sewer treatment plant goes down, the lift station goes down. It's not tens of dollars, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so we're not playing with monopoly money here at all. We're playing with taxpayers' money, and it's public money. We also need to engage everybody through the organization, including our taxpayers, on the decisions that we make and where to invest. A great example of that is what to do with the new pool or the pool question, and have that question coming up at a potential referendum question at the next election, and how to replace that and continue adding value to this community. Is it the same? Is it something bigger? Is it something different? Is it really needed? Asking all those questions along the way and engaging the taxpayer, staff, and council to answer all those questions as we go along through the process. And as this community's learned and how this community has in its culture, it's resilient. And asset management allows us to be more resilient and face any challenge that comes before us. This community faced a significant event in 2013, and how it's bounced back is a credit to its resiliency from not just the organization, but the people that live here. And I think asset management is one of those pieces that reinforces resiliency within the whole community. And we've just finished, the Southwest berm. We've got new infrastructure that we have to start depreciating and planning for the future of that infrastructure and how it's going to be replaced and maintained over a long time. And that's a plan that we still have to work on as well. So as we move from asset management, we kind of develop some budget 2020 guiding principles that helps staff kind of build this budget for council. Now, I'd love to say this, given the pace of technology, we can just hand it to the computers and we can, like Calvin says, leave math to the machines and go play outside. But we're going to be here for the next 3 or 4 hours talking about math in particular, and we'll go from there. So we've tried to align the goals outlined in the strategic plan with this budget, making sure that people are first, that those 5 pillars are looked after. We've also tried to incorporate council's strategic priorities, those top 5, the aquatic center, the pedestrian bridge, the new website, the events role clarity, as well as the long-term water strategy. We tried to adopt and align with council's adopted policies to make sure that they're consistent and that we're not contradicting something that council's adopted in the past. We've maintained existing levels of service. There are no new levels of service in this budget, as you'll see as we get into the summary. And we wanted to maintain the existing levels of service. We haven't asked the question of the public about what levels of service they want to see and how much they're prepared to pay for increases of level of service. And that's part of this budget process as well, is to consult with the public and find out what their needs are, find out what they want, find out what they're happy with, find out what they're unhappy with, and see how we can make improvements ongoing through this organization and through this community. We need to manage growth and development appropriately within the community in a High River, and we need to set expectations for those developers, very clearly outlined what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, where we'll assist and where we will not assist, and making sure that the taxpayer has no burden for growth and development from a developer. And that's kind of one of the key principles here as well. And then we need to be creating a proactive asset management framework, just getting everybody talking within the organization, community talking about it, and making sure that we're planning a little bit for the future. And we're, like I said, there's no silver bullet. We are not going to solve all the problems for 50 years down the road today. but we can do our little part and try and balance what the existing residents should pay for the future versus what the future residents should pay for the future, and figuring out what that formula actually is. And making sure that it's affordable to live and stay in within this community from a tax rate perspective. So those are kind of the guiding principles that we've kind of adopted. I'll pause there. I know that was a lot of information in one fell swoop. If there's any questions before I move on to the next segment. None from council? I don't see any hands.
Hang on. Michael.
Thanks, Mr. Snodgrass. Just on that guiding principles, Chris, I'm sorry, maintain existing levels of service as a guiding principle.
Yeah.
Sometimes service levels decrease, right?
Sometimes they do.
Where appropriate. So if we're going to have it as a guiding principle, maybe not to nitpick your words, but maintain an appropriate level of service rather than existing, because speaking it as existing says we're going to maintain everything at its current rate for in perpetuity. So
yeah, and let me clarify, that's how we develop the budget process, and then it's up to council to determine whether that's an appropriate level of service to maintain the existing, or they want to increase it or they want to decrease it. And so, from a staff perspective, that's how we develop it. And then we want to start that conversation about levels of service with council so that it's either maintain, decrease, or increase from that perspective, and determine what is appropriate based upon the community consultation. So I'm going to go into the budget highlights now. And I know that we gave you like 400 pages to read. And I don't guarantee that there won't be a test at the end, but we will kind of run through that. And I think Leanna's online now too as well. But we prepared this budget on the following assumptions: revenue neutral basis, just new assessment worked into our revenue side of things, and with a 0% property tax increase in the budget. We will be presenting scenarios to council of 1 to 5% on November 2nd for their consideration, and to integrate those into any public survey that we put out for the public consultation process. But they will be linked to new projects, programs, or increased levels of service that we see here from council, from the public, or increased levels of reserves. We currently are transferring around 3.4 million is projected into our reserve accounts, which is approximately 16% of our taxation and utility revenue. So that's a pretty good amount that's going in there. Not consistent with the financial management strategy, but there are some things that the assumptions in the FMS, that the financial management strategy, that have led to a reduction in the transfer to reserves. Some information for the public and for council: 1% tax increase is approximately $180,000 in new revenue. That's not a heck of a lot, considering that one dump truck costs $180,000. Those types of things, everything we play with is big dollars from that perspective. We've also balanced the budget with no increase to the utility rates at the current point, and we'll be talking with council on November 2nd with scenarios associated with utility rate increases. And again, new projects, water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, those types of things, increased levels of service will be talked about at that time. We've decreased our FTE count by 3.5 positions in 2021. And that's being achieved with not filling some vacancies that we currently have and that we didn't think that were necessary to keep. Community groups have been requested and they've been submitted. We have in the budget $801,000 dedicated to community group funding. That will be presented with the community groups next week on November the 2nd, I believe. The ask from the community groups is for $847,000 in total, but I won't go through the breakdown. I'll leave that to Leanne. New initiatives is a reduced program from previous years, I think. We've got $236,000 for 2021, including an asphalt replacement program, a community engagement hub. We've noticed with COVID that going online, we need to figure out a better way to engage our public if we continue to have social distancing and not having large gatherings. Youth engagement worker for the rec center to combat some issues that we have there with youth and trying to engage them better and get them working in a progressive manner. Active transportation planning and safety strategy, which is linked to the Northwest Pedestrian Bridge, and a firefighter standby proposal, which we think will also reduce overtime costs associated with within the fire. On the capital side of things, here's a little Far Side cartoon. I love the Far Side. Contractors and owners sometimes disagree on exactly what the project scope is, and so we need to get a little bit better on defining what the project scope is and sticking to our guns associated with that. But we've been trying to work very diligently to revise the capital program to match our human capacity within the organization. This community has been very lucky to have a substantial amount of funding from the province to fund all its flood works over the last 7 years. And that has been supported by additional staff grants to support additional staff, project managers, engineers, administrative staff. And now we need to get back to that reality perspective of what is normal governance, what is normal capital for this organization, and matching our human capacity with that. Some of the key projects I think that are really important within the capital plan is the slab replacement, the curling rink, and the small arena. We've got some grant funding coming down the pipe for that, some opportunities there. Center Street bridge repairs, the 4th Avenue water and wastewater main replacement, which is a carryover from 2020. The wayfinding signage program, which is another grant program from the province, and the wastewater treatment plant upgrade design. We're submitting a grant application at the end of this month, actually Friday, to go after some grant money to build the upgrades to our wastewater treatment plant. So some key things that are in the capital budget that you'll see in more detail when Leanna gets to that point, but really, really important, impactful projects within the community. Renewal projects, we're anticipating that we'll see an extension. We're hoping for within the next 18 months so that we'll be fully complete all the projects. That includes bank protection of the Eagle View area, ongoing Highwood River Dike armoring that's seeing some erosion taking place, some repairing corridor vegetation restoration through the Wallaceville area, tree replacement and mulching, and debris removal from various locations along the river corridor as well. So we've got some work to do, and we feel hopeful that we'll see this money extended, and that we'll have some of these works to continue working on in 2021 and part of 2022. Some of the things that we're seeing as increases, we're anticipating an increased request, not that we have to necessarily consider it, but an increased request from municipal enforcement by $60,000, and this is based upon increased administration costs that they're seeing. We've have FCSS grants back in the budget at $60K, and we'll bring those to council for final approval. We still are keeping the signature event funding at $35,000 in the protective services budget, but we may shift that once we understand the role clarity that council sees and envisions for events within the community. Just a quick stat, the 2020 COLA is calculated as a 1.3% currently, and that was a little bit of a surprise to us considering what we have been seeing in the economy. The budget has no COLA for staff increases proposed at this time, and that we'll leave that up to council. Performance merit increases remain at the STEPS program, and that cost impact is about $129,000, provided no COLA approvals approved by council. Level of service conversation, we'll get into more detail about this as we start seeing some of the community feedback as well, but we're maintaining the existing levels of service that we see for 2019-2020. No decrease, no increase, just maintaining the status quo. This is a conversation that we really need to get input from the public of what their expectations are and understand those, and try and see if they align with financial capacity and human resource capacity as well. The community survey will provide some of those expectations, and we hope to get good turnout from that perspective. But some of the topics that we need to understand for level of service includes municipal enforcement, contracted services. Council clarified the next one on snow removal, downtown pathways and overall roads yesterday, so we've established that level of service. Parks maintenance, we've had lots of complaints about parks maintenance as it relates to irrigation, and impacts of going from a manicured space to a non-manicured space. Solid waste and recycling, and we've had some input about not having summer hours and reduced hours right now through the COVID experience. And COVID's impacted all our operations in some form. But do we go back to our normal operations for the solid waste and recycling, which is an increased level of service from 2020 that we've seen some cost savings? And then are there other services that people are expecting? Is there something new that they want to see within the community? Is there expanded operations at our rec center and expanded hours of operation from that perspective? Do we go to 18-hour-a-day kind of operations at our rec center or not? Those types of things that we need to ask questions of and see where we go from that perspective. So that's the conversation of the level of service. Kent, is Leanna online now? Yeah. Leanna, if you want to take over from here, talking about the revenue and start getting into the details of the budget, but you feel comfortable moving forward now? Or you?
I do.
Technology is working for you?
I'm not sure how I'm going to show my screen yet, but we'll
Okay.
go from there. So as you see within this slide here, we see our total revenue that we collect through taxes and utilities is $31.8 million. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to see if I can start my video. There you guys go. Now you can see me too. So what we do see in the overall budget here is you see our municipal tax revenue that is basically unchanged except for new growth within our assessment base at $14.3 million. We have our sales of goods and services of $2.4 million. We have our utility fees for water of $4.6 million, wastewater at $2.7 million, solid waste at $670,000, and recycling at $280,000. Then we have our other revenue, which is our franchise fees and our concession and franchise fees and our investment income and our gain on investment. So our concession and franchise fees is actually $2 million. Our interest income is $835,000, and our gain on investments is another $100,000. So right there you see a substantial amount of other revenue. My breakdown is slightly different from Chris's. I see my provincial grants is at I basically have it at $1.6 million. Our local government transfers I have it at $1 million. We have donations, which also fell under our other revenue of $418,000. And also under other revenue, we have our transfer to reserves of another $661,000. Can we go to the next slide, please, Chris? In our expenditures, we see our salary and wages of $14 million, which is actually a decrease of $461,000 from 2020. We see our contract services of $7.1 million, which is actually an increase of $120,000. Our transfer to reserves, I apologize, I don't have that. I just see transfer to reserves of $3.4 million. Our telephone and utilities of $1.8 million. Our debt repayment of $1.2 million. Our supplies of $1.5 million, which is in our materials or our supplies, we see a slight increase of $119,000. Our insurance of $599,000, we see a slight increase of $70,000, or actually it's $69,000, but it's easier to talk in round numbers. So we see minor changes. Overall, we have tried to monopolize on finding efficiencies within the organization. So Chris, can you go to the next slide? Oh.
So I guess now, Leanna, this is where you get into the detail, and council, if they want to go into the detail line by line, cost center by cost center, or division by division. And we'll leave that call to mayor and council, which format you'd like to go through, and we can run through any three of those options, that's for sure.
High level to get us,
Okay.
to get going through here.
Leanna, high level?
High level, okay. Oh, is
Sorry.
it- Oh, you are sharing. So when you stop sharing, Chris, I'll be able to share.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
I'm sorry, I'm being challenged here by technology, so just give me a moment, please.
Chris, the education requisition, knowing that that's basically just a collection, but and looking back, and is that in this budget somewhere, or have you moved that? We've talked about it in the years past, but
we'll be getting to that. That's really an in and out, and we haven't really seen that number yet. Leanna, I haven't seen anything on the education requisition yet. But when we get those numbers, we'll be talking with council about that, what that looks like and what that impact's going to be. Because
it is an in and an out and doesn't affect our budget.
I know that council likes to see an overall tax increase, so I am currently working on a projected increase based on last year's requisition. So I've been working with the equalized assessment, the preliminary equalized assessment for 2020.
Right.
And we will have that prepared for you for the next council meeting.
And it does, even though it's an in and out council, it does affect your ability to tax. Right? Because at the end of the day, it's a cumulative effect. If we tax and the school requisition tax goes up and the seniors requisition goes up, that all comes from the same taxpayer. There is no difference. And so that can be a burden, and that can put paying taxes within this community out of range if we're not careful from balancing all the components.
It doesn't affect our actual operating and capital budgets, but it does affect our tax increase rate.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So do you guys see the High River proposed 2021 operating budget by division? Okay. So as we've gone very high level, as Chris had mentioned, we've actually reduced our FTEs by 3.5 FTEs overall. We have our 2020 community group funding that we're proposing to fund at $851,000. And what we have built in this budget is 801. And we have in our requested funds, it's at 847,375, which will be back to you on the 2nd with all the presentations from our community groups. So I'm just trying to work on multiple screens here. Sorry, guys. So we'll come back to new initiatives at the very end. I thought we'd start with looking at our operating grants. So just for your information, we've received the $1.8 million in operating grants. So we get our MSI operating, we have our police officer grant of $100,000. We have our municipal policing assistance grant for $312,000. We then have our emergency management preparedness program grant for just over $4,000. This is basically to run some of our scenarios for when we do an emergency management plan when we do a tabletop, and we invite either just internal, or if we can sometimes have external users involved in this. We then have our staffing grant that is funding the operations of our renewal staff for $300,000. We have it within FCSS. We have the Alberta Human Services, the annual grant for $340,000. We have a Volunteer Alberta grant for $1,000. Then within a Family Resource Network, we have $94,000 to support the hub portion and $260,000 to fund the spoke part of the program. And this is all due to the restructuring of that grant program that happened in the end of March of 2020. We also then have in our long-term recovery money, and this was to fund this was our wayfinding portion of this. So actually this isn't in operating anymore. We moved it to capital. And then we still have within the operating budget, we have $15,000 for our Canada Summer Jobs. So this one is an annual grant. We apply by position and we get funded for them. This in 2020, it was a little different as we had reduced staff due to COVID-19, and Human Resources and Finance are currently working on how we are handling that for 2020. Within this operating budget, we have transfers from other local governments. As you see, basically, we have Foothills County that does most of it, or all of it. So we have $68,000 within FCSS. We have $20,000 in Family Resource Network. We have $650,000 within our fire department. We have $162,000 within our recreation complex. We have $17,000 within our arenas and $98,000 within our aquatics. So basically, we have $1 million that are coming from the county. So overall, when we look at our salary and wage, as we started doing this for you last year, we, is this too small for you guys to see? Do we need this larger?
Yes, please, Leanna.
Okay. Better?
Better.
Okay, thank you. So within our community services that we had budgeted in 2020, we had our community services admin, we had a budget of $238,000. In this budget, we have $0 because we've done some restructuring within community services. Within our salary and wage, within our corporate services, last year we had $3.1 million. This year we have $3.1 million, so a difference of actually only $17,000. So this is just transfers between different areas within our corporate services. Within council, we see an increase of less than $3,000. So we went from basically $329 to $332. Within our, executive, last year we did not have fire planning and parks planning all part of executive, but due to the restructuring with Chris's arrival, we've now included fire planning and parks planning within executive. So for comparable issues, last year we had a budget of $3.6 million within salary and wages. And in this year we have $3.4 million. So we see a slight decrease of $200,000. Part of this was we had the municipal intern that had ended within our planning. And then there's been some restructuring that's happened within planning this year. And then parks planning, there's another restructuring that's happened corporately. And our community economic development, where last year we just called that economic development, there's been another restructuring and we see a slight decrease of $75,000. Within financial services, we had a budget last year for salary and wages of $1.2 million. This
Excuse me,
year,
Leanna,
yes,
you flip to the next page, right, with financial services?
yes, I do.
Are we to ask questions on this existing page as we go? I know it's peanut dollars, but it's scrutinized by myself at least. On the council budget, you got a 0.9% increase. Why? What's that about?
I would have to get back to you to look at the detail.
Okay, can you check that out, please? Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you. So then financial services, we see a decrease of $250,000. So where we see the change, so in accounting services, we see a reduction of $233,000. So we had a restructuring there, and we had our municipal intern contract end in 2020. And then in assessment services, we had a retirement. And so when we try and replace an employee, we never bring them in at the top step. So we see a slight decrease there. The one that gets a little bit wonky here is in 2020, we originally started with a reduction to our salary and wages of, I think it was $305,000. And then due to COVID, we turned around and we reduced our operating budget by another $300,000. So we saw a decrease in salary and wages of $605 in 2020. And in 2021, we're only looking at $510,000. So this is due to, we've increased our attrition protection, and we had a one-time COVID-19 reduction in salary and wages due to the pandemic in 2020. Within operational services, we see very little change. We had $3.2 million in 2020, and in 2021, we see $3.2 million. We actually see a slight reduction of $6,000, and that's due to staffing changes throughout the organization within operational services. In renewal, it looks like we see a significant increase. One of the things that we had is in our budget last year, we had one of our renewal staff that was contract was going to end partway through the year. And we have extended our renewal staff to help manage in our human capacity of all of our renewal projects. So we've extended these contracts at this time. So we see an increase of $82,000 here. This, of course, is funded through Government of Alberta grants. This is not funded through tax dollars in the renewal office. So last year we had REPO, which was Recreation, Planning, and Operations. This year is REO, Recreation, Engineering, and Operations. We also have added to Riley's repertoire is renewal office there. So we see basically very little change in salary and wages here. We had $3.2 million. Now we're at 3.24. So a slight increase of $39,000. Overall, though, in our salary and wages, we see a decrease of $461,000. Oh, PDFs jump a lot faster on me. I'm sorry. So in our training category, we are now, and Chris, I'd like you to step in where you feel comfortable here. In 2020, we had a budget of $340,000, I believe. And this year in 2020, or $351,000 in 2020, and in 21, we are reducing that to $250,000. This was due to administration's plan to focus more on effective training and the type of, efficiencies across the organization.
Sure, and I'll jump in here, Leanna as well. We've taken a hard look, and HR and I have been working on a plan and a process to learn what everybody's training, what they're spending their training dollars on, and try and economize and be efficient from a team training perspective, what adds value to the organization. We want to make sure that there's a return for the value that we send people away, because training is expensive. And we still think that there is some room for improvement within this line item. But we took a really serious look at this, Sonia and myself, and we felt that $250,000 was a reasonable number for next year. And we still think that there is some opportunities there to take a look at other ways to do training from that perspective. So council is going to see a training policy in the new year coming forward for their consideration. State note what our philosophy and values are when it comes to training our employees and that ongoing learning to make sure that we increase the talent resources that we have within our organization. And that's kind of the philosophy that we're trying to adopt here. And so, if there's any questions about that, let me know. I'm more than happy to answer anything.
Yeah, Chris and Leanna, how in depth in this are we going to get? I know, like, I want to get council just to absolutely just jump in when you have a question. It's just rock and roll. And but if council has specific questions on line items, they can ask those questions while we go through the higher view of it, right? Because everybody's had this package. If you got questions on this, then ask them. But we all know how long some of this stuff can take sometimes.
So
Leanna, when we get going line by line. So
if I may, I have a question.
go ahead.
Jamie, go.
On the training, pretty much every department is down again, except for council. Council is up by 12,000 again on the training side of it.
Yep.
And I'm not sure what that's about. Is that the per diems for other stuff, or what is it?
That I can answer that. That is in preparation for the election and council training and orientation with the new council, if needed.
Good explanation. Thank you.
So Leanna, what I would suggest doing based upon that feedback, let's just go to the bottom line numbers on each cost center. And if there's questions, council, jump in, wave your hand, jump up and down. Kathy's got a question. Kathy's, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question about the grants, and I'm just trying to understand and make sure I'm reading it right. When I look at the Foothills County grants, I see them all listed there. And then when I go to the library summary, it says local government transfers 18K decrease due to new shared service agreement. So did we have an agreement with the MD and that's been taken out? Or is that a decrease on our part?
Yeah, there'll be a decrease on our part because they're holding their cash for 2020. And once we sign the water and sewer agreement with them and they agree, they're prepared to pay for 2020 and moving forward for our shared services agreements. So their contribution is $18,000 towards the library.
So it's just not listed in the local government grants. That's where I was just confused.
Yeah, it's right now. It's currently not real because we don't have an agreement.
Okay.
So we can't really record that until we have a signed agreement.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, Bruce and Carol. Go, Bruce.
Thank you. So I'm just looking, and this is maybe obvious to everybody, but I'm just looking at page 24 and community economic development, and it's showing a change of 1 FTE increase. And then the next page is community economic development. It's showing a change of a 1.0 down. And
that is
what was that?
That is a difference between permanent and non-permanent. So we have a permanent employee now in community economic development. where before they were both, the 1.5 was both temporary.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Leon.
You're welcome.
Carol?
Thank you. I have a question regarding, I guess it's line item 1203 and 1208. Just about, I'm just kind of inquiring as to, there's quite a significant salary increase from over the 4 years, 87,000 from 2021 to 2024 for corporate services. And interesting that Councillor Kinghorn just mentioned about 0.9% for council, but I guess I'm just kind of curious about why that is quite significantly higher than a lot of the other departments.
Which cost center are you in, Carol?
In corporate services, 1200 to 1208.
Corporate services admin, currently we had a restructuring from community services admin that the one position was reallocated to corporate services admin, but then due to everything that's going on within our communications, we've transferred that position to communications for 2021 and to 2022 up till the end of March. So that's why you'll see the increase in corporate services admin.
Okay, and then I have another question on that same page. Under financial services, when it said $255,000 budget reduction due to corporate restructuring and municipal intern contract ended. And then on the next page, it says 233,000. So are those two different things?
One is financial services, which is accounting services and assessment services together. And the other one, where it's the 233, is accounting services only.
So I'm reading it correctly that there was a budget reduction of 255 in the one department and then 233 in the other?
255 is the total divisional roll-up, which is accounting services and assessment services together.
Okay, thanks, Leanna.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I move on?
Yeah, I have one, Leanna, please.
Okay.
First off, on these first two categories, salary and wage and training, appreciate the efforts on finding efficiencies, because that's out of these two sections right away, that's what hit with me. So thanks to everybody for their work on that. My only question is from the salary and wage category and going to recreation, engineering, and operations. Across from that lead line REO, $39,000 increase due to correction of steps payable to staff. Did we miss something? Was that just like a HR payroll error? Or?
This was due to leaves that had happened, and it was a disconnect between, I thought that when they were on leaves, they weren't entitled to a step, but when they actually return, they actually are entitled to the step that they missed and then the next one.
Okay, fair enough. I'll have questions on steps later. Thanks.
Okay. So have we gone over the overall budget summary enough for everyone?
Any other questions? Continue on.
Leanna, there was the other question about council's salary increasing.
Yes, and I said to Jamie, I would have to look into the details and get back to him.
Okay, in the notes within that budget page, it does indicate that it's increased by the 1.3% for COLA.
Yeah, I would like to just confirm before I answer the question.
Thanks, Leanna.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. So no more questions on the overall budget summary, and then are we going to go divisional level next?
Sure.
with all these accounts in here, I take longer to scroll. Sorry, guys. So how I classify as my next division would be our general government. So we see an overall increase in our general government by $442,000. And without making this smaller or going to this second page, it's 3 pages long. I apologize for this. So we see a total change in general government of $442,000. We see an increase in revenue of $185,000. We have $45,000 in taxes, which is due to growth for new assessment within the town. And we have other revenue increase of $164,000, where we see an increase in our concession and franchise fee revenue of $78,000 and $100,000 on gain of investments. We've taken a hard look on our investments, and we have seen over the past few years, we are actually recording quite significant gains. So this is why we've actually budgeted for it for this year. Within general government, though, we've also seen an increase in our expenditures of about $422,000. So as we were talking a little earlier, we saw the $190,000 of an increase in salary and wages due to the change from the 2020's budget to 2021's. If we see an increase of $190,000. So it's the attrition credit, and due to the one-time COVID-19 reduction in salary and wages. We then see a reduction in our training, conference, and travel of $54,000. And this is general government is where we put a lot of our global adjustments. And without digging into each cost center, we know that we'll see significant changes after the policy comes out, and we're now applying this appropriately by employee. And we do realize that there are some staff that require extra training dollars due to keeping accreditations and keeping everybody safe in the community. So the next one in general government, we have an increase in our contract services of $561,000. This is $355,000 is due to restructuring of the organization. So instead of having a lot of that in salary and wages, we didn't want to lose the funding. So we've moved it into contract services at this time. Chris needs some time to evaluate what we need for the organization to be moving forward. And then in 2020, we saw a one-time reduction for contract services of $206,000. Then we see also in a decrease to local boards and agencies of $25,000, and that was due to a one-time funding for the Memorial Center to allow them to pay a bunch of shortfalls that they had accumulated over the past couple of years. And the last one here in general government is we see a decrease in our transfers to reserves. So we see a decrease of $899,000. At this time, we don't have any funding for the aquatic center. We've kind of shifted gears, and we're looking to see what the community wants. And this is where we're going to get some more information, hopefully back, besides from our survey, and then with our, I believe we're going to plebiscite with the election.
Leanna,
Yes.
can I just ask you what concession fees are?
That's ADCO Gas.
Oh, thank you. Okay,
And
perfect.
Fortis. Got it? Perfect. Thanks, Kathy. So what I consider my next division is council. So in council, we see an overall decrease of $22,000. We see an increase in revenue, and that is transfers from reserves, because this is where we've been putting money away for our non-reoccurring expenditures. And this is due to the election that's happening in 2021. So we're going to pull $13,000 out of additional $13,000 out of our reserves to fund some of the election expenditures. We then see a decrease in expenditures within council of $9,000. So the net overall is a decrease of 9. We see an increase in training, conference, and travel of $12,000. And as Chris had pointed out to everyone here earlier, that is due to training of new council members and maybe not new council members, but additional training just on the, what?
Because we need it.
Yes,
Well,
you need it. Okay.
Let me be clear. We're not sure who is running and who is not going to run. So we have to budget for a full replacement.
We then see a reduction in communications of $8,000. And a lot of this is promotional items that we provide to the community. Looking at a hard look at everything that we've done within our budget. Kara and Legislative Services team have done a hard look at, a trend analysis. You haven't been spending the money year over year. So we've reduced it by $8,000. We then see an increase in our supplies for $7,000. That's also once again due to the 2021 election. And then we see a decrease in our transfer to reserves of $20,000. And this is because we're not putting money away to fund some of the non-reoccurring expenditures. The big one here, once again, is our 2021 election. So our next division was financial services, which in here we have accounting services and assessment services. So in financial services, we see a total change of reduction of $169,000. So we see a decrease in our revenue of $18,000. There's $5,000 a reduction in sales of goods and services, and that's due to a reduction in our tax certificates. We've done some trend analysis on this, and we've been overly aggressive in budgeting for our tax certificates, so we reduced it slightly by $5,000. Our next reduction in our revenues in financial services is our provincial grants. That is our $13,000, and that was for the final quarter of our municipal intern, which ended in 2020. Then within financial services, we see a decrease of $187,000. A big part of this is in our salary and wages, where we see a reduction of $255,000 due to restructuring and the municipal intern position that has ended in 2020. We've then also reduced our training by $6,000, and this is due to some of the change in our training philosophy, and I'm sure we will see changes even next year once we solidify this more on an employee by employee. We've also reduced our public relations by $3,000, and a lot of this was due to we are now going to produce a lot of our professional reports in-house between financial services and communications, and not go external looking for additional help. Then where we see our big increase is we see an increase of $79,000 in other expenses. This was due to increasing our allowance for bad debts, and this is due to our provincial grant in lieu payments. As the province has continually changed how they're funding. 2 years ago, they paid 100% of our grant in lieu. 2019 was, I think, at 100%. 2020 will be at 75%. And then 2021, it'll be at 50%. So instead of reducing our taxes, we increased our expenditures to write off taxes. So our next division.
Yeah, could I just jump in there?
Yes.
We did send a letter on to the ministry regarding this change and our opposition to this change in legislative requirements for the government of Alberta to pay same property tax as everybody else. So I don't know if this further reduction is going to have, future additional impact, but it's something for council to be aware of in the future as well.
Can I just jump in for a sec, Mayor Snodgrass?
Anybody can jump in whenever they want to start talking.
Thank you, sir. Just on that point, thanks, Chris, for mentioning that, and Leanna for bringing it up, and for the public that's listening. That point right there is property tax that the provincial government is not paying us for provincially owned property within the municipality. So it stands out as an expense piece, and it's good to have explanation on it so that everybody understands where that deficiency comes from, as it represents just a little under 0.5% of a tax increase, I guess, is how we could view it, right? So I just wanted to bring some more light to that for those that are listening in on this. I think it's important to understand that. And thank you, Chris, for going and I guess lobbying back to the government on that point. Thank you.
So our next division is executive. So in executive, we have our CAO office, our community economic development, our fire, our planning, and our parks planning, with only the prior years for comparative analysis. So overall, we see a total reduction of $245,000. We see a decrease in revenues of $364,000. That's a little misleading. And that's because we've reclassified some of our provincial grant funding for our wayfinding from operating to capital. So once you take out the wayfinding money, it's not as glorious because it has been transferred over into capital. So within our sales of goods and services, we see a slight increase of $7,000, and this is due to our planning area with their increase in subdivision fees and a small reduction in their development application fees. Then our next one is our grant revenue. It's a reduction of $392,000, and this is not only our recovery grants for wayfinding, but also our planning municipal intern contract that ended in 2020. So right now that shows it's $392,000 in a difference. Then we see our local government transfers. We see an increase of $53,000. And this is due to our new shared services agreement has not been implemented at this point because we're waiting for the wastewater and water agreements to be ready to be signed. And so within the new shared services agreement, there will be a change between fire and then some library.
Deanna,
yes.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Yes.
Just going back to the provincial grant, I just see 355,000, but you said 392. Am I missing a sheet?
That is in are you looking at executive summary, or are you looking at
I'm looking at the executive summary where it says 355, 380, and you just referenced 392. So I'm just a little bit confused.
Same page that you're sharing right now too, Leanna.
Yeah.
Well, then I misspoke. I should have said 355. So when I was doing my cheat sheet notes this morning, my fingers were a little chunky on the key. So.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to clarify that discrepancy.
No, that's fine. Thank you for the catch. So we've now clarified grants. We've talked a bit about the local government transfers. So overall, when we do sign the agreement with the county, with the water and wastewater agreements all being in there, we're going to see a change. It's just going to be a shuffle between our fire department and then more on our recreation side, where you'll see increases over in recreation and with the library and also with our recycling, as they will be paying a portion of that as well, where at the current time we have stripped that out of the budget because that has not been implemented at this point. And then the final one in revenues, we see a decrease of $68,000, and that is due to our non-reoccurring. And the big part of that was in 2020, we had money that we were pulling out of reserves for the town plan. And I know the town plan, we are still currently working on a update on that. It's not a full rewrite of the town plan. And so a lot of this money will not be transferred in 2020 and will deal with any external transfers that we need to pull out of reserves at the end of the year. If not, we'll have to pull it through in 2021. So then in our executive summary, we see a decrease of expenditures of $601,000. Oh, I'm sorry. See, I said 601, it should be 610. My fingers were chunky on the keys this morning. So we see a decrease of salary and wages in executive of about $200,000, and this is due to restructuring. We see a decrease in our training, conference, and travel of $12,000. We see in public relations, we see a decrease of $79,000, and this is due to our community economic development projects, our long-term recovery funds that have been transferred from operating to capital. And we had split the wayfinding project between public relations and contract services. So you'll see a similar comment within our contract services, was where we transferred it from operating to capital. We see a minor decrease in our phone and utilities of $8,000. And this is where we've done some analysis on our power and gas consumption. We're going to see a reduction there, but what we are going to see is an increase in our delivery rates across the board. In executive, we see a slight increase of our insurance of $6,000, and this is due to our rate increases throughout the industry. And then we see in contract services, we see a decrease of $382,000. And the big portion of this one is for our wayfinding project and our town plan, the difference between 2020 and 2021. And then our final one in executive is we see a slight decrease of $8,000 in change to some of our non-regular expenditures. So our next division is corporate services. So within corporate services, we have a number of cost centers. So we have our corporate services admin, our corporate properties, our ledge services, our privacy and records management, community or communications, human resources, health and safety, our information services. Then we have our community, our family and community support services, or otherwise known as FCSS, our community well-being, which last year that was called community development, where this year we've relabeled it to community well-being. Then we have our community support services admin, then family resource network, or formerly PLC or Parent Link Center, affordable housing or culture center, RCMP, municipal enforcement, protective services, and disaster services. So these are all the cost centers that are rolled up into corporate services. And when we start going this large of a division, it gets sometimes very, some of the numbers look really big and sometimes things can be lost in the shuffle. So I'm hoping I'm going to catch all of the details here for us. So within corporate services, overall we see a slight change, a slight increase of $2,000. So normally when I come to talk to you and you're going to say, well, it's a change of $2,000, you're going, well, why are we even talking about this? Well, I think it's important that you know where the changes have taken place. So overall, we see a decrease in our revenues. And so in our sales of goods and services, we see a decrease of $40,000 of our provincial fines. And that comes from our municipal enforcement. We've done some analysis on the provincial fines that we actually receive. And we had been overly aggressive on saying what we were going to collect. So we've reduced that by $40,000. And everyone knows that if you don't pay your fine, you get a parking ticket, a speeding ticket, whichever, and you don't pay it, you get a penalty and everything else. Well, you can not pay that for a number of years. And then when you go and renew your driver's license, that's when all your fees are due. So that's when we actually get paid for it, is when it's actually paid. So,
Leon, I'm just going to stop just for a second there.
Okay.
Carol. What do we need to rewind here? Because I
No,
don't,
you know, I think
I don't
what will
want you
be
to
easy.
get behind here.
I think I just have to go with the flow. I think what I will do though is just send out an email with all of the questions that I had, because I'm just finding that I think this is where I'm missing the in-person contact, where it could just be kind of, you know, I am struggling. I'm getting very confused actually, but I'll just listen. That's probably the best thing. I'll just listen and I'll send my questions later.
Okay, but being confused, I got to question that.
Well, I think because I'm not like,
Exit.
I don't seem to be like, by the time I see one of my little flag notes, we're moving on. So then I don't want to keep going backwards. And I apologize because I know I'm detail oriented, but I just think I'll just, like I said, I'll just do a summary of my questions later on.
Okay. Okay. No,
Yeah.
that's,
Thanks though for checking in.
yeah, you're
There was
welcome.
a moment I was just going to just lie down.
Okay, thank you. Continue on, Leanna.
I see Chris has got his camera on. I think he wants to talk. Oh, he's took his camera off again. So in corporate services, we see a decrease in our expenditures. We see an overall decrease of $17,000 in our salary and wages. This is due mainly to retirement of some staff that have been here for a number of years. And then when, of course, when we hire a new staff member, we never hire at the top step. Our training, conference, and travel, we see a decrease of about $45,000. And this is due to our corporate training philosophy on training. I know that within our HR department, we used to have a bucket of money for corporate training. And we are, as we are reducing our training budget altogether, this is where we saw the major shift of that. We see in public relations a decrease of $7,000, and this was finding internal efficiencies, or finding efficiencies with our internal work processes. We see a decrease of phone and utilities, and this is due to power and gas consumption offset with our increased delivery rates. With our insurance, we see a slight increase of $7,000, and this is due to rate increases within the industry. Then in contract services, we see $60,000 decrease due to finding work efficiencies with internal work processes. For example, in here we see communications with our website update. So that was a 2020 project. So we're not budgeting for the full cost of doing a website update. And so we're now going to be doing this on a smaller scale, I believe, with our new initiative that's coming forward. And then within contract services, we've done more networking. So instead of going out and hiring a consultant, we're actually networking, talking with other municipalities and going, well, this is what we're doing, this is what you're doing. Let's compare notes and see what we can do to improve our internal work processes. In supplies, we see a significant increase of $170,000. This, though, was due to a reclassification of $40,000 from information services from capital to operating. And then we saw the finalization of our community capacity building project, or our Red Cross grant, the final portion of this to take place in 2021. Then we see a decrease of $105,000 of our transfer to local boards and agencies. And this was due to a reduction of $30,000 in our CVAC grants, which I know we will be discussing with council when we're talking about community groups. We saw a reduction in our United Way funding of $30,000. And then we do not have as much of our Red Cross money to spend for our community capacity building of $40,000. And then our final reduction in corporate services is our transfer to reserves of $17,000. And this is due to numerous non-reoccurring expenditures.
Leanna, before we move on, can I ask one question just for my own clarification?
Absolutely.
On the backing up to the RCMP services line, is that their renegotiated contract, that increase? Sorry if I missed that detail, because they were in negotiations for an increase. Does that $122,000 increase represent that, or is that an increase of service to a member? Or
that is a combination of both. We have been told that they need 18 members to support the town of High River. They have also then told us they're probably only going to staff it with 14 members. So we have within the budget, we have a reduction for the 4 members, but then we have the estimated new rates of what they are negotiating at. So we've applied those rates within the budget. The other thing that we do need to be aware of, as of right now, we're only putting our RCMP costs in at 70%. But the minute that we hit the 90% or the 15,000 residents, we then are on the hook for paying 90% of the RCMP cost. So in future years, when we do grow, this is going to be a significant change for this organization.
thanks for bringing that up. We all know that's looming on the horizon, but thanks for bringing it up here again. Appreciate it.
So our next division, I call it Recreation, Engineering, Operations, and Renewal. And I just call it REO. So within here, we have within our Parks and Rec, we have our recreation complex, our arena, our aquatics, our field house, our recreation programs, parks, spray park, and cemetery. Then we get into engineering. So we have our REO administration, our engineering, our safety codes, our GIS or mapping, our asset management and renewal. And then when we move over into operations, as they are large all on their own, so we have under operations, we have administration's operation, we have building or facilities maintenance, fleet and streets. And then we have in utilities, we have stormwater, solid waste, recycling, water distribution, water plant, wastewater collection, and wastewater plant. So a fairly large area here again. So overall, this change, we see an increase of $1 million. So nobody start panicking yet. I see smirks and smiles and stuff like that, so I'm okay with this. So overall, we see a slight decrease in our revenues of about $31,000. We see a decrease in our sales of goods and services, and this is due to reduction in our utilities revenue of $26,000 and a reduction in our recreation user fees of about $50,000. So overall, our decrease in sales of goods and services is about $74,000. In our grant revenue, we actually see an increase of $24,000. And this is due to our recovery grants for our renewal operations. And this is due to the change from 2020 to 2021 with extended contracts. So we only had, I think last year we had 1.75 FTEs, and this year we have a full 2 in the renewal. Then we see in our local government transfers, we see a decrease of $24,000. And this is once again due to the changes within our shared services agreement not being implemented. For example, in our recreation programming and in our recycling. So once we actually have a signed agreement, we will be changing the way that we are actually budgeting, and we will have those back within our cost centers. But as of right now, we do not have them reflected in those cost centers. And we are, once we have the signed agreement, we were anticipating to have them signed for, I believe it was January 2020. So we didn't think it was realistic to make another assumption and saying it's going to be signed right now to be budgeting that way. So our next one, we see a slight decrease in our donations revenue of $5,000. And this was due to our ATCO gas donation for our recreation complex. We then see a slight increase in our department transfers of $5,000. And this is because our family resource network, we're now showing transfers from one area to another as a department transfer. And that is to fund the CAP program within our recreation area. And then we see our transfer from reserves. We see a decrease of $38,000, and that's due to some of our non-regular expenditures that we've been budgeting for in the past. But our revenues are very minuscule compared to where our expenditures, where we see the large increase. So in our increase in our expenditures, we actually see a full $1 million increase. You go, well, that's very daunting. Well, we're not increasing our taxes by $1 million, but we found organizational efficiencies throughout numerous different areas. And there's been just shuffles between different grouping categories. So in our salary and wages, our overall increase, we see $114,000. And so as our Rio area is basically half of our organization. $114,000 is not really a huge amount. We see a training, conference, and travel. We see a decrease of $20,000. Our public relations, we see a slight decrease of another $4,000. Our phone and utilities, and of course, this is where most of our utilities for our natural gas and our electricity are all captured. This is within Rio, is we see an increase of $114,000. We actually see a slight decrease on the consumption for the power and gas, but what we do see is an increase in our delivery rates. And this is why we see the increase of $114,000. Our next increase here is in our insurance of $56,000. In contract services, we actually see a decrease of $135,000. And so
Leanne, I'm just going to stop you for a sec. It's Bruce here. And I'm sorry if I'm the only one having this problem, but my screen seems to be, because I'm assuming what you're talking about, we're seen on the screen, and I'm not following along if that's in fact the case. If you could kind of point with your cursor as you go along, that would help me a whole lot.
Okay, sorry.
No, not at all. Thank you.
And I apologize, I have fat fingers from where my notes were. So in our contract services, we actually see a slight decrease of $55,000. So we see a decrease in our landfill charges of $40,000. Our contract services overall, we see a slight decrease, but then we see an increase in our safety codes. One of the changes that we have already put into this budget is we saw an increase in our snow clearing of $25,000 based on Eugene's presentation yesterday and just looking at the costs that we have incurred. So then in our supplies, we see a decrease of $78,000. And we've been able to reduce a bunch of these expenditures by finding organizational efficiencies. Our other expenses, we see a slight increase of $2,000, so I didn't have it in my notes. But the big one here is an increase in our transfers to reserves of $876,000. So what we've done is within here, we have reduced our reliance on our utility revenue to support taxes. And this is, as we had been working with council, we were reducing our utility diversion every year. So we see a change overall within Rio of $875,000. Oh, our last division is our library. Our library kind of is one of these standalone. So we see a reduction in our revenues of about $18,000 in our local government transfers. Once again, this is due to our shared services agreement because the county originally says that they're going to contribute to our library, but because we don't have the agreement signed, we have removed this from our budget at this time. We then have very minor changes within the library. We see an increase of $1,000 within insurance. We see an increase in our Marigold grant and our Centennial grant, so for our High River Library of $7,000 for an overall increase in our expenses for the library of $8,000. So with the reduction in revenues of $18,000 and the increase in expenditures of $7,000, that's an overall increase to the taxpayer of $26,000. So Chris, where are we next on the agenda?
We head into capital now, and if you want me to kind of do a quick capital summary, I can step in and share my screen back and start talking about our capital plan for the next 10 years and 2021. So let me find the presentation again.
Excuse me?
Sure, go ahead, Jamie.
Can we do like a 3-minute bio break?
Yes, we can. I might be a little bit longer because I got a long way to run if I need to do a bio break. So
thank you.
So we'll go on pause for a few minutes. If everybody can just shut their cameras off, and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Is that enough?
That'll be fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you? Oh, I'll take it. Yeah, take it. Oh, Ray's coming because it's bathroom break. Oh. Yeah, everyone. No, I just got back from, I kind of got going late for lunch and then we were talking, I had to go down to HR about taxable benefits and Sonia, are you gonna be there at that meeting? Because, we're really into this, like that list that went out for the Christmas lights. There's, some of it's taxable, some of it's not. How we can do vouchers and it's not, right? So if we went to Sobeys and said, can you give us a basket with a turkey and a ham? Not any more choices. You can't have too many choices because then that gets where they have too many choices. And then that's almost like, so they can't go there and say, I want this, this, this. It has to be just a basket already made up. But if they made the basket for a turkey dinner.
We still got microphones on, some of you.
Yeah. Right. That's why they said a voucher for a turkey or a ham.
So let's say a turkey dinner.
Dinner. Yeah.
Should there be more than a turkey there? But you can't change it. That's it. That's you're getting a voucher for your turkey dinner. That's taking every sauce.
Yeah. Don't get, you can't change it. You can't
Go into the store and pick and choose.
but you can only give them two choices.
No, the one choice is the turkey dinner. Here's all the ingredients for turkey dinner. One choice.
Anyway, so so. Okay, oh, now what?
What's that?
Few stragglers still. Is Bruce there? Yeah. Okay to get started?
Sorry, I'm very much here.
Okay. So I'll jump in at this point in time. If you guys want to turn to tab number, I believe it's tab number 4 in your hymnal. That would be the capital plan. Does everybody have that same tab? So we're going to go through this, mostly focus on 2021. I believe everybody here can take a look at what the 10-year plan looks like. We have really kind of taken a real hard look at the 10-year plan and shrunk that down from about $112 million to about $80 million. And I think there's still some work to get it down even further. And we've been trying to match that with human capacity. And when we talk about human capacity on the capital side of things, we're talking about between $5 and $6 million maximum kind of capital plan per year, unless there's an outlying project like an aquatic center or a wastewater treatment plant or a water treatment plant that is a significant capital expenditure that's going to be managed and project managed by a consulting engineer. So when we try and match human resource capacity to our capital plan, we're trying to target that $5 to $6 million of stuff per year. That doesn't overwhelm our engineering staff or our Parks and Rec staff or whatever staff are involved in that capital plan. So the capital plan that you see before you, I'm going to summarize it or put it into the detail that we have for 2021 in particular. We're looking at continuing on the wayfinding signage program. That program was started in June of this year, and then we ran into a few problems with passing of one of our contract employees. And it looks like we're going to get an extension on that funding to allow us to proceed in 2021 with that project. So we plan to proceed with that, and it's a combination of taking a look at all our highway signage as well as our internal wayfinding signage, and coordinating that based upon the plan that council had saw back in June. And so we anticipate that will be completed before the summer of June 2021. And hopefully that goes smoothly and we don't run into any more complications. We will be bringing back some other concepts, especially on the highway signage, because the highway signage component is quite expensive once we get all the pricing in. And some key locations as well, to have a conversation with council about how to increase our communications with the public and how to make sure that we're sending our messages out if we want to integrate LCD signs in or not. And instead of placing all these vehicle mounted LED boards around town whenever we have flood awareness or COVID awareness or anything along those lines, how we can utilize that in a more respectful manner than some big Las Vegas sign blinking and flashing down the strip, so to speak, right? So we can certainly design things that are more appropriate to the landscape and the context from that perspective. Asset management planning, we're still working on that process, and that's getting our software system up and running and integrated from that perspective, and that's about $142K. That just is the software piece that leads us into a preventive maintenance system and management of inventory. It's starting to build the inventory of our assets, but it's not necessarily the priority planning or taking a look at what's the total cost from that perspective. From recurring, yes.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The wayfinding signage program with 228,000, I thought that was closer to 400,000. Like I thought the funding was like closer to 400,000.
Yeah, I think I'll have to take a look at that, Carol. I think you're actually right. I think it's closer to like 378. and I hadn't made that connection. So
Can
I
I jump in,
apologize.
Chris?
Pardon me?
That was the economic development funding that's been there for a while. That's Carol's probably thinking of the 400 plus that was there as a total economic development package that we had, which a significant portion of was going towards the wayfinding signage. So just for some.
Because it was through long-term recovery and MSI.
That's right. That's correct. Let me track that number down, Carol, and I'll make that note.
Okay, thank you.
We got to asset management plan. We had recurring operating expenses coming forward for municipal software, and we're doing a needs assessment right now and trying to integrate a more holistic approach on our software platform instead of being focused on one department or one division. Trying to see if there is a product out there and what the needs are as an organization, and seeing if there is one or two or three software platforms that can talk to each other that make some sense to link better and share information across divisions. Right now, the software does create silos, and we're trying to break those barriers down and to make it a much more information sharing network, so that people can stand alone and do the work on their own without having to go chase information down from person to person that has access to certain software. The next one is about 400, 380.
A second, Chris, sorry. On this software thing, this is something that's talked about every year, and there's always big numbers attached to it. And but it's the same conversation every year, which is the problem, because it's always, well, we need to find a new piece of software to do everything. Are we anywhere close after this many years as to getting this and the software we have? I know there's some of it that we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on. Like 10 years ago, we bought software and never used, and so we're
making some steps. We're making progress. We've hired a consultant to sit down with all our leaders and take a look at our workflows and our current software packages. We have, I believe, over 44 different software packages currently, and see if what is available out there from that marketplace before we go to market to see what fixes it. The biggest limiting factor is that the licensing that's available for some software packages and the cost associated with that. But we want to make sure that engineering and planning are talking to each other, and that finance is integrated into that. That recreation is integrated into finance because it's a standalone system right now. So we've got some disjointed software kind of workflows. I would suggest that they are, that we need to figure out what the fixes may be, and hired this consultant to take a look at that, and we've got a internal steering committee that's looking at that, including Kent, Ray, and Nicole, to guide that process and come up with an answer so that we can make the best decision possible before we buy another piece of software that may be adding to silos or disjointedness within the organization.
Yeah, no, and I completely understand. It's a nightmare to find proper software for this big of an organization that allows each other to talk to, because when you're using separate pieces of software, rarely do they actually integrate and talk to each other, right? So I appreciate where you're going. I'm always watching that one because I continue to hear about it every year that we're doing this now. And my other question before we go on, asset management plan, another one that we talk about for years and years and years, is we all understand and know how important this is. But my question is from when we started down this road, probably 5 years ago, how far along are we with this? Where are we at?
Well, we've got some software, we've got some staff working on inputting data and cleaning up the GIS base from that perspective on the mapping side of things. We've got some long-term plans for master plans for our infrastructure, looking out for what our future needs are going to be. We've got some gaps when it comes to inventories of what's in the ground and age and life cycle from that perspective. We've got some gaps when it comes to setting priorities, when it comes to what comes first. which piece is the highest priority, and we've got to integrate that into some kind of system from that perspective. And we don't have the full, we have a TCA cost, or tangible capital asset cost, of what our book value of our assets are, but we don't have what asset management call would be the replacement value of that asset in today's dollars. And so we've got a lot of work to do that, and then that will help us, feed into the capital plan, as well as give council good decision-making framework on what tax rate should be. Are we taxing appropriately? Are we not taxing appropriately from that perspective? And what is the breakdown on future residents paying for the future of the infrastructure, and what current residents are paying for the future of the infrastructure, and trying to figure out what that split is going to be. So we've got some work to do. I would say that we're about 50% there. And I think, maybe a little bit less. I know that we don't have a lot of inventory studies taking within our repository of information, but it's not to say that it's not there somewhere.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And I know it's extremely time consuming when you're setting something like that up. And
well, and the
do we have the staffing levels in the right places? Like, if this is a real important thing for council, do we have the labor power to get it done? That
I don't think we do. I think we could probably use some additional help, whatever that may look like, to get us to a base level of operation on the asset management side of things. Right now, it's one individual doing that work, and it's overwhelming, right? It's a lot of inventory. It's checking plans. It's going back through the data and making sure it's correct, and it hasn't. And part of this is going to be a process of truthing it too, because we're trusting plans that people may not have updated from 1920, that they may replace that water line in 1940 or 1960. And sometimes in my history with that, I found that engineers have not necessarily been the best on returning as-built data that when it was completed, right? So sometimes that there's a gap there of information, and we don't know that until we dig it up, and all of a sudden we find that, hey, it was replaced in 1975, and the pipe is good. And I've come across that on several occasions where we thought we had something to replace, and when we dug it up, and it was in great shape. It had another 50 years on it. So you fill back the hole and put the asphalt patch on, and you move on from that perspective.
And don't tell anybody.
Yeah, well, and then you diagram it, right? Then you find out where it is in the inventory.
There you go.
So from that perspective. Okay.
That's what I kind of wanted to know appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, and speaking of municipal software, any municipal software has to talk to the software platforms that we've made investments in, like our Cartograph, like any work order system that we're maybe moving down the path of. Like any recreation software that we may want to be looking at from a programming and an online perspective. So we need to make sure that it talks to each other, because right now, not a lot of them talk to each other. And so they're standalone systems. So we've got to be careful from that perspective and make sure we're putting the investments in the right place. Breathing apparatus. So self-contained breathing apparatus for the fire department at $380,000. This is going to be a joint purchase with the county and a couple other municipalities as well to get buying power, so to speak. Fire hall expansion. As you can see, the steel is starting to go up. We're going to see the walls and the roof probably on by the end of November, and then there'll be all inside work from that perspective. But we got about $5 million overall cost with all the consulting fees that are still part of that to expand for next year. RCMP building renovations, which is a carryover from this year, and that's a multitude of different things, from shelving that we looked at, fingerprint reader replacements, some rejigging of some of the office spaces to make it more usable, those types of things. Some minor and some drainage improvements on the outside of the building as well to protect the foundation and the parking lot. Highwood Bridge rehab, council is very aware of that project. And we'll be going out for tender in the next month or so, and we'll have a firm price of what that would look like in early January or early February, I would hope. 7th Avenue Northwest asphalt replacement. This is the Northwest lift station component of the project. That project looks like it's going to be a carryover now too. And so that would be the new asphalt from 7th Avenue from the lift station to Coal Trail, I believe, from that perspective. Laneway paving between 3rd and 4th Avenue. When we got pricing this spring for this, it was 3 times the price that we had budgeted for, and the contribution from ATCO. So we went back and rescoped that and had some resurvey and redesign done, and coming back with a scope down project that will fit our budgetary requirements. We've continued to have pedestrian improvements various throughout the community. What I'm going to commit to council is that we'll provide a very detailed list so that you're aware of what projects are going to take place moving forward before we start them, so that you see that and that we make sure that we're making the right investments in the right spots as well. And that we also communicate a bit better than we did with our residents about what that work's going to take place. A carryover of 4th Avenue main replacement. This is that sewer and water main replacement. We'll talk about main replacements in a little bit more detail as we start talking about some changes in philosophy. We have the Sunshine Lake gazebo replacement at $130,000. That's in very deep need of repair or even just removal. It is pretty ugly at this point in time and has had some vandalism. It's not a safety issue yet, but it's looking pretty derelict. Cemetery ribbons.
Chris, just a quick question. There's 2 gazebos there. Is that one of them or both of them?
That's, I believe, just one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotta be the one in the northwest corner of the lake, that green one, I think.
Yeah, the green one, yeah.
The rough looking one.
They're both green.
Cemetery ribbons at about $30K to make sure headstones don't sink. Fleet replacement, 4 vehicles, 2 tandems, I believe, a loader, and 1 ton, I believe, at $537,000.
The cemetery ribbons, can I rewind you for a second?
Sure, you bet.
That was supposed to be done this year. Obviously not.
Carryover.
It's a carryover, but we got to get it done because we're starting to put monuments on there.
Yeah.
And then all the monuments, any more monuments that go on there are going to have to be removed while they redo the ribbons and then replaced. Then you're at the risk of wrecking the monument.
Yeah.
And that becoming a cost to the town, right? So
yeah,
that has to be done, and yeah, it's yeah,
that's one of our priorities. Oh, that's one of our priorities.
Thank you.
Then we have some minor improvements at the ops yard to increase our security there, because we still have some thefts taking place, and increase our security. And then some major improvements at the BSRC, including some security system and lighting improvements. Another phase 3 of our roof replacement and improved accesses. Some HVAC systems for the Zamboni room for improvements. And then, of course, the big one, the slab replacement for the curling rink and the small arena at $1.7 million. So fairly significant projects from that perspective. When we talk about reserves, and I can lead this conversation a bit, and Leanna, jump in wherever you think I'm varying from that perspective. Your reserve tracker is part of your budget package as well. It's as a separate tab. It'd be tab number 5. And it's got all the detail and what the forecast is moving out from that perspective. So these are the big ones that we have. And I think there is some work we have to do on some of the reserve accounts and seeing if we can amalgamate them or change them, and making sure that we have the right number and they're there for the right purpose. But certainly, the big ones that we face that you see and use on a regular basis include the MSI at about $5.3 million to $5.4 million that we currently have. Our community reinvestment reserve fund is going to be sitting at around $7.5 million. Offsite levies, which we haven't seen very much major investment in this year, is sitting at $7.2 million. Water utility is 7.7, wastewater at 2.1, and then just the capital grant, the federal gas tax, is sitting at just under 900. And then the CIR, the capital infrastructure reserve, is sitting at about $1 million. So in total, We have about $32 million in reserves currently from that perspective. So that's a pretty healthy reserve for a community this size. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's never going to be perfect. And, you know, we need to understand that it's going to be an ongoing battle to balance reserve balances versus current taxation versus capital projects as well. So we have to be pragmatic from that perspective and make sure that balances from that perspective.
Can I just get clarification on something, Chris, on this spreadsheet? Summary uncommitted balances. So the capital infrastructure reserve at $1 million, is that, like, are these balances or this, like, we've been putting into that for a number of years, and why is it only at $1 million? And the community infrastructure reinvestment at, like,
yeah, that's the Leanna.
Well, there's the community infrastructure reserve, and then there's the community infrastructure reinvestment fund. So that's where Chris is talking about. Do we need to combine them? Do we need to redefine them and figure out which monies we're talking about? That's where a lot of confusion has taken place over the last few years.
yeah,
Because the CIR was for new and CIRF was for replacing of old.
right.
So are we getting too granular, not granular enough? And this is where Chris and I are working together, or Chris and I and Nicole are all working together to ensure that this is clear for the community.
But Leanna, the numbers that are on this spreadsheet are the balances of what's.
That's correct. Uncommitted at the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about the reserve tracker? Sorry, I jumped slides, so. Nothing else? So, as the cartoon says, any problems with the budget can be solved with chocolate. Unfortunately, we're not here face to face, so I can't hand out chocolate bars to each of you, but when we do meet face to face, we will. So our new initiatives that we're looking at, you know, compared to last year is a much scaled down version. We're looking at a communications hub, and it's a fancy word for an engagement piece to try and have online engagement with the community. Something like Bang the Table or Civic Space that has ongoing community conversations taking place with the community on a regular basis, that we can be moderating and that we can have open houses, especially in this COVID environment, that will give us options from that perspective. And so that's about $9,000 per annum for the licensing fees associated with that. But it is a virtual web-based kind of program, and it provides some really good linkages with our new website to facilitate the community engagement and the community consultation that we'll have to undertake in the future as well, and gives another option for us. One of our asset management pieces that we're talking about is a contribution of $100,000 per annum towards just asphalt replacement. So one of the shifts that I want to talk to council about as well is when we talk about main replacement, water and sewer main replacement. In theory, the only reason why we're probably going into that space and digging up the road is to replace the water and sewer mains. Very rarely are we in there to replace the roads in horrible condition from that perspective. So the primary reason is that we're going in for water and sewer main replacement. The water and sewer fund should pay for those replacements, not coming out of grant funding. This asphalt replacement program would be for those roads that are failing that don't require main replacement underneath them. That the main replacements has a minimum of 15 or 20 years left of life cycle, and that the asphalt is failing dramatically. And we see this, I think there was one cul-de-sac that was emailed out, 8th Avenue Southeast, I believe it was, that was circulated this spring. That would be a perfect candidate for this because the sewer and water mains don't need to be replaced, but the road is failing, it's alligating, it's cracking, it's separating from the curb, and it's starting to pothole. So it'd be a perfect candidate for this kind of program. And that would be simply ripping out the asphalt, not changing the road base, and paving the road structure again, or micro paving, or any combination of different things that we may do. One of the ones that Cody brought forward to me and we've been talking about is firefighter standby. And it's something that through COVID that we hired additional extra firefighters to cover, to protect us from any COVID infections that may take place within our roster of our firefighters. While right now it looks like it's a $21,000 cost increase, we're pretty confident that when we start getting this implemented, that we'll see the same amount saved in overtime for our firefighters. Not only that, it will give us a better level of service and ensure that we have enough manpower to roll trucks whenever there's an emergency from that perspective. Here's a big ticket item, the LCD sign replacement at BSRC, $90K. So that's a big one. The other one we want to talk about, and it's more of a philosophical discussion, but it's parks turf management, because we've had a request even today to talk about irrigation in one of our parks. And we stopped doing some weed and pesticide application this spring as it related to using herbicides, and did that more on a targeted basis. But it's more of a philosophical conversation with all of council and with our park staff, probably at a committee of the whole meeting, to just talk about that philosophy and what that shift looks like. We don't see that it's any significant cost increase. It's just a change in the way we do things. And it may actually save us money over the longer term. The youth engagement worker at about $32,000 per annum, and this is to help us in lieu of hiring security guards and improving our overall security levels at the rec center for weekend games and that type of thing. Post-COVID, I'll have to say that, having some youth worker there to engage the youth to try and get them out from causing problems for our staff and get them engaged in doing something productive and positive for the community. And then our gauge station maintenance. Currently, we maintain all our gauge stations. That requires Kent and Jason to go out a couple times a year, and whenever they go down, they're put into some risky situations. And some of the technology needs significant upgrades to be more consistent in its approach. So this is a $30,000 per annum kind of contracted services out, put out a request for quote and contract that out to a company that will change out the equipment and at the same time monitor and make sure that this equipment is always running so that our staff don't have to run out there on a weekend or whatever to get it back up and running. So those are the new initiatives. Any questions about those new initiatives?
Chris, I have a very quick question on the youth engagement worker. Did you say that would replace the security people that have been in place?
We never got to the point of security before.
Okay.
Yeah, so this would be in lieu of that instead of hiring a security company to be there and taking a more community-based approach than an enforcement approach. Right.
Okay. Okay, I guess I'm just wondering, if this doesn't, have the intended result, I imagine the enforcement approach is still an option then.
Yes, it is. Certainly it is. And you can see the detail of all the business cases on your tab number 7, I believe it is.
Okay, thank you. 6.
Tab number 6. And there's more detail there. We're not making any decisions today. We're just presenting information to you to go through, and we trust you to read everything.
Yeah.
This is, I'll need to comment. Out of my 25 years, this is the most engaged council that reads everything from cover to cover that I've ever experienced. Bruce, you even pointed out a mistake. Old habits die hard. Right? Old habits die hard. After working 25 years in BC, I put BC in one of my reports that I sent to you guys. It's kind of like calling the mayor his worship. It's taken me a year to stop that habit, right? So takes a while. Bad habits are hard to die. Yeah, he's twitching.
Chris, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I thought I saw it, but we've received a grant from the province for the rework at the airport of the ramp and taxiway area of 1.6 or 1.7 million. And I think we're going ahead with that work, but I didn't see it in the capital plan. Is that somewhere else or am I just missing it? I just want to make sure that it's in there somewhere.
Of the taxi plan, of the taxiway?
Well, the ramp repair and taxiway, yeah, it was.
Yeah,
kind
so
of
the ramp repair is in here for $120,000.
The
the
total
airport?
project is 160.
Yeah, 160, but we got the grant for 120.
Sorry, yes, correct.
Yeah.
I'm
You scared me at
doubling my
1.2 million.
doubling my
Jamie.
zeros here.
Yeah, I was like panicking. Did we miss a zero somewhere?
No, I doubled my zeros, sorry. So it's in there, where would I find that?
That's item number 30 on the 2021 proposed capital budget.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris, if we're not making decisions on these new initiatives today, where in the agenda is the deliberation on these new initiatives? Because I don't see it.
That will be at our subsequent meeting. So that will be not next
Meeting
week.
three?
Meeting 3 at the end of November before we take it back to council for final adoption. We'll get all the
Okay.
public feedback on that we get, that so the council's fully informed of what the public wants to see, and then they can make those decisions based upon that.
Because in the agenda, meeting 3 is a if required as it sits right now. So it's really, it's required. We're going to have it.
Yeah. So, well, actually, no, I should qualify. Meeting 4 at the end of November, November 30th. That's when we would be making those deliberations on all the new initiatives.
Okay.
Okay.
So do you want us to get into the meat and potatoes of these things then?
If we can open it up now, we have time. It's 3:14, so we still have time. If there's ones that you want to cross off, let's cross them off now so that we can soften the blow. These are not funded at the current point, so this would lead to a tax increase potentially or other cost savings somewhere else.
How much more do you have in the presentation for today, Chris?
I've only got a couple more slides just to talk about consultation and the next steps.
Okay, so Michael, why don't we let Chris finish off, and then we can start going back, because we do have a little bit of time. I don't want to go right till 5 o'clock today. If we can be done before that, 5 o'clock's fine, but.
Okay.
So if we get your slides done, Chris, and then we can go back and start spitballing things around just for another hour or so, anyways, if needed.
So here's the public consultation process that we put together for council to consider. One, COVID has really impacted how we can publicly engage. And so we've come up with kind of a survey process from that perspective, and use the month of November as the consultation process. So we can't use tools like open houses. We can't use tools like workshops. We are going to try and invite members of the public to provide comments at one of our upcoming meetings as well. Give them a half hour, much like we're doing with the managers. But we're also kind of integrating a community budget survey this year, which will be, hopefully we're hoping to get around 300 responses and see how we can build it from there. And we attached a draft into your budget package that I hope it's still a draft. There's still lots of work that we need to do, but we'd like to launch that next week with it closing on November 25th, and then have online and hard copies available from that perspective. We're targeting December 14th for adoption of the budget, with November 2nd still as a public meeting, and November 30th. If we do require November 9th, we would be in the morning. That's a council meeting day with a COW meeting at 1 o'clock or 12:30, I should say. So we would have to meet in the morning that day or move it to another day that week. We've also prepared, and we're just polishing up some draft articles on the budget process in plain language. We want to be focused on education on budget and taxes and get those out to the public. We will circulate those later this week by email to council. So you can take a look at especially the first 2 articles on the budget process from that perspective. And so that you can see the launch pad on how we're trying to engage the community. We want to start having those out one per week over the month of November from that perspective. Now the next meeting is November 2nd, 8 a.m. to noon. We'll have a summary of staff's priority setting sessions to show how it lines up with council's priorities. We'll have the community group presentations, which will probably take a good portion, an hour or so or more of that meeting. We'll bring forward the conversation on fee-for-service framework, especially as it relates to some of those community groups like the library, the Lights and Parade Society. We can go into more depth on the level of service discussion, which also includes probably the new initiatives, and then the tax rate scenarios and utility rate scenarios from Leanna from that perspective. We will have a conversation that day if we need to have a subsequent meeting the following week. And then we'll have another post-survey meeting on November 30th from 1 to 5 p.m. to finalize, collect all the public comments received and to finalize what new initiatives are going forward, what's not, if there's a tax increase, if there's not a tax increase, if there's a utility rate increase or not a utility rate increase, and we can make those decisions prior to the December 14th meeting. So we still have lots of time. We can still have lots more meetings if we want, but I know that, hey, brains are full. And it's been a lot of information in a very short period of time. And there's lots more information out there. I'm all about transparency, openness, as you guys are all aware. There are no secrets, and we don't want to have secrets within this organization at all. We want to be forthright and honest with everybody that's out there and making sure that things are being looked at and scrutinized. So welcome any questions, comments, or concerns, and then we can go back to new initiatives. Your Worship, Mayor Snodgrass.
You owe me $4 million.
Okay.
Michael, let's go back to you. You were the one that.
Thanks for the opportunity to start, I guess. Why don't we go to those key capital projects and start with, I guess I'll go to off of page 19 of Chris's presentation and go to Sunshine Lake gazebo replacement. Not that I'm not in favor of it, but this seems to me that we might have some service groups, and this leads to maybe a bunch of crazy conversation, but service groups that like to take on these types of things. Immediately pops into my mind, and not to roll this onto a group like Rotary, but they're an organization that has stepped up and like to do projects like this for the community. So that was just one item that I thought there might be some exploration on. Do you want me to go through each of my yeses and nos, Craig, or do we want to go through these kind of item by item? Can't hear you, bud.
You're on mute, Craig.
Got too many windows open with spreadsheets and stuff. Why don't we just go back and try to address, like, I know everybody's writing lists, and I've got a couple of items that I kind of want to ask us, where are they? We continue to talk about it. And like really just spitballing things around real loose and dirty. Because we'll go back in one of our subsequent meetings, and I've got the in and outs kind of lined up here, adding things along, and we'll do just like we did last year, where we take the vote from council in or out, yes or no, going through individual council members. Is that okay, Michael?
Yeah, that's the point I was, just trying to get to, and yeah, whatever format you want to run under, Mr. Mayor, you've led it well before, so I was kind of hoping you'd take us there again.
That's what I'm thinking. I think it worked pretty good last year, if just by lots of conversation initially and getting everybody's ideas and throwing things in, and then figuring out what's in, what's out, and what does it look like for taxes.
Okay. Then can I just ask a couple of questions on these new initiatives on two items?
Continue on.
Not yes or no questions, just clarification questions for me. HVAC for the Zamboni, Chris. I understand that's probably some kind of code requirement.
Yes.
What have we been doing up until this point? Running a pipe out the back door kind of thing?
It's code compliant to the day that it was installed. So this would be an improvement. This would be a replacement, and it would bring it up to current day's code. But there's no necessary requirement for us to update it at this point in time, because it is still safe.
It's functioning, it's safe, our employees are good, the equipment's okay in that room, it's okay.
This would be just an overall improvement, but we haven't been told that it's unsafe.
Okay, and then the other one was in regards to the firefighter standby. A couple of the points that in the budget proposal was that it would improve the service level, and it also would decrease the overtime costs. I'm unaware of us having a service level problem, and what is the cost of the overtime that the fire department incurred under that premise? So I can understand the 21,000 to what we were, what we're trying to mitigate.
Yeah. So I can speak to the level of service comment, and I'll get Leanna to come up with the overtime numbers, what our projections are from that perspective. And you got to remember, 2020 is a little bit odd because of COVID, and we had extra staff, hired extra staff on stream so that we always had enough coverage in case our firefighters started going down with COVID or were in isolation from that perspective. And that's been the difficult part from that perspective. So this goal will be kind of and the reason why it's a new initiative, we feel that it's going to save overtime costs, and Leanna will get those costs for us. But we feel that it's an increased level of service because it guarantees that we're going to have enough guys to roll equipment and better spread of our shifts and our full-time equipment, our full-time firefighters. So we feel that it's a increased level of service. But we also feel that it's going to have an opportunity to save some overtime from our perspective and delegate some responsibility from our chief and our fire chief to our captains, so there's more work for them to do from that perspective, or additional work for them to do from an administrative perspective. So it'll free up some more time for our fire chief and our deputy chief to be looking at strategic initiatives and more improvements from that perspective on how we operate, because they've got a wealth of ideas. I'll tell you, that is an idea creating kind of department right now, coming forward with all different things. And so that's kind of the premise behind it. And it's to ensure that we were having some struggles through COVID about firefighters responding, that especially the on-call firefighters, to calls. And so this would be one of those strategies to broach that a bit. And we were starting to lose firefighters, and we're at risk of losing some firefighters too because of the county going to some departments full-time, firefighter departments as well. So, but we do feel that this is an increased level of service, and we do. Leanna, if you can answer the question about the overtime projections that we think that they'll save.
I know right now, for what I have in front of me, we budget about $30,000 for overtime. So in 18, we were over that by about $12,000. In 2019, we were over by $12,000. In 2020, we're already basically at budget. But where we are seeing the difficulties is having the right staff there to be able to respond to fires. And so when Cody and I went through this, we basically figured out what we're seeing in just the firefighter standby pay, but is an increased cost of about $21,000. And I said to Cody, I actually would honestly see a reduction, because you wouldn't have your captains being called back in or your firefighters being called back in, because basically a lot of this, the standby guys would all be our PPCs, but our PPCs are not sticking around to be available if they're not being paid. So they're have second jobs here or second jobs there. And one of the things that Cody has said to me is, with having, during COVID, having the standby firefighters here, he's more comfortable on being able to step away and maybe even going away for a dinner out. And same thing with our deputy fire chief, is not panicking that they have to be right there in the next 30 minutes, because if there's a call that comes in and they don't have anybody available with a PPC, then we're calling back our other firefighters, if not our deputy fire chief or our fire chief. So overall, it looks like the costs for our standby firefighters would be a $21,000 hit, but I do believe that we would actually reduce our overtime costs.
Thanks, Leanna.
You're welcome.
And the reason why it's a new initiative is that it's an increased level of service, and we can't be certain that we're going to be a wash financially from that perspective. We anticipate it being a wash, but We don't know that for sure, and until we get it implemented from that perspective. Any more questions on capital, new initiatives?
I got one that'll 24th Street top lift. It continues to be brought up every year and never ever enters into a budget discussion. This is something that's, I don't know. Bruce, do you remember what Riley told us how old that road is? 20 years old or so? Well, we've been here for 7 now, so it's got to be all of it.
Yeah,
So
it's at least that.
So it is, and this is the one that goes by the RV dealership, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So we have it on line 25 of the capital plan, primarily as kind of an assessment of what's going on there. We know, and Riley, you can chime in. We know the road base is starting to fail in certain areas. The developer didn't follow through on the final lift, and we put $50,000 in there to do some work, whether it's just to cut out those big dips, because I hit one of those big dips in my car the other day and it didn't sound very good. Fixing those big dips, and we've got it in 2021 as a $50,000 kind of fix at this point in time of taking the priority of the worst ones. The top lift would be quite a bit more money.
Yeah.
And we need to be talking about that. And whether, if council wants to proceed with the top lift, we can certainly put that in, do some design work and get that rolling forward from that perspective.
Well, it's one of these things where, you know, we've done so much work in this town over the last 7 years. And yet we've still got, doing so many brand new things. And yet we've still got stuff that's lurking out there that's 20 years old that we've neglected to touch and actually finish the job. And regardless of whose responsibility it was, the town of High River, council, admin, everybody, did not hold the developer to account to get that done. And it is now our responsibility. So regardless of what happened in the past, today it's ours. And that road it's embarrassing to go along there. And, there's for sale signs along there. My God, if I was looking for property, drive down that road, I ain't buying along there. Taking I don't know how many manhole covers there are on that road, but it's extraordinary. But they're all 6 inches too high compared to the actual road. Blah, blah, blah. I could go on and on. At some point in time, it has to be the only way that's ever going to get finished is not through a developer, it's through the town of High River. Are we prepared to finally take that on and get it done? So we have $50,000 for next year, and we have $550,000 for 2022 in the 10-year capital plan. So $50,000, I think, is all the design fees from that perspective. I forgot to check 2022. Do you think the $550,000 or $600,000 would do the full top lift of that road, Chris or Riley? It'd be close. Because we have infrastructure reserve funds for this purpose. It'd be close. Right, it depends on, once we did some geotech work on those sinking areas, about how much road bases that we've lost. Sure, let's call it $1 million. Yeah, let's call it $1 million to get that road finished and done. Yeah. Like I said, we keep plowing money into these reserves, and it's fun to watch them get all fat and everything. But the reserves are for this purpose. So, I'm going to push to get this thing done next year. Like, we got the money, it's sitting there in a reserve fund. Let's do it.
I totally agree with the mayor on this. It's not just the Autoplex that's upset about it. It's all the businesses along there. It's anybody who ever drives along there. And as you say, Chris, hits a dip. I mean, it's embarrassing and to think that road has been in that shape for 20 years, and you've got you know, I mean, just speaking to the Autoplex, I mean, you've got people driving in there, you know, buying $1 million rigs and then running a gauntlet, a manhole gauntlet, when they're coming into, when they're trying to get out of town, or bringing them in for servicing, and it's just it's in horrible shape. And as Craig was saying, like we keep doing all these new things, and I'm glad we're doing these new things, but we've got to finish the town before we do a whole lot more else that's new. We've got to finish what we got, and I'm certainly supportive of using reserve funds to get this job done, you know, while we can. So thank you.
So at this point, if there's a desire for council to, the majority of council, to make this a priority project for us to get an update, a firm price, now will be the time for us to say, okay, let's scope out the work. Let's send it out for a request for quote. Let's see what we get back, and then we can actually put that into the budget if that's the case, where council can say yay or nay at that point in time.
I like it.
Okay.
What about second over there? Do we got an idea of what that's going to cost us?
Second, the gravel one,
Yeah.
it's over $1 million. And that's if it stays in its current location and no underground infrastructure. If it's realigned, it's going to be way more.
That's another discussion another day.
I agree with you, Jamie, and that's a different animal because of that development, you know, going so slow and everything. But it is absolutely another road that needs to get taken care of. But
yeah,
we chew on this one and get 24th done, and second is next.
And in conjunction with 24th, what about the slip ramp? Is that going to stay in place, we think, for ever and a day?
At this point in time, and I don't know, you guys can chime in, but the last time I was involved in a conversation with Alberta Transportation, it's the slip ramp is staying until they redo the Cloverleaf overpass.
Mm-hmm.
Until they figure out a better. Otherwise, we're not taking it out.
Yeah, we need it for access to the town. If they ever do anything at that overpass, or you won't be able to enter on 12th.
They got to come up with a different solution if they want us to take that thing out. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And they, you know, Alberta Transportation, they'll give you all the near misses data that there is no possible way you can calculate near misses because you weren't there. And if it was a miss, it's a miss. So that one just doesn't fly with me. There's.
Yeah, sorry, I hijacked it a little bit. I just
No,
think
you don't.
24th is part of that slip ramp, and
24th is part of that slip ramp, absolutely, and slip ramp stays.
Yeah, I don't see, like, yeah, I'm not going to talk about the slip ramp anymore, but it's a hornet's nest. You don't ask the question if you don't want the answer, and until they come in and say they're going to spend $60 or $90 million on a new overpass, which is years away. You know, based upon the volumes, they're going to be 20 years before they even have that conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll have a new Center Street bridge before that, Jamie.
And a walking bridge?
Easy now. Okay, any more questions? I'm done
Any other projects that we need to add to the list? Small, large, medium?
One question I had with the Highwood River dike armoring. Where is that?
That would be in Riley. Jump in. I think this is the northwest, extending the northwest dike, where it's starting to erode. So on the northwest corner of the river.
How do we have a dike that's already eroding when we haven't even had water on them yet?
It's the armoring. It's right at the river level, right? So it's starting to chew the bank behind the armoring. So it's
item number 37.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
I see it. I just want to, yeah, I know on the spreadsheet where it is. I'm just trying to think on the actual river, $800,000 that we already need some armoring on a brand new dike.
Yeah. Well, it's an area that was armored up to, and then it's the river starting to, whenever you hard surface a river, it'll find its path, right?
Yeah.
And it's starting to chew away the bank that's that's not armored.
So this is right in the corner around Scotty Allen's house, Al Stang's house, around in
somewhere in there. Yeah.
Okay, that does make more sense.
Yeah.
Debris removal. Well, that will. I take it that's around Eagle View and stuff. I would hope getting garbage cans out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let me be clear. Those renewal projects constitute probably 3 years of human capacity from a capital planning perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else with anything else for today?
Sorry, Craig, can I just ask a question for clarification on line 7? We've got joint administrative building security modernization, and it's scratched out, but below it in the total, that number stays in. So I was just confused whether it's in or out. And there was a couple others scratch out, but I'm just.
It's out.
Okay.
Because the counties come back, they were guiding this project, and so it's a cost shared project between the county and ourselves, but we fund it through our books and they just pay us a bill. So they.
I wasn't so much questioning the actual thing. It was just the question, or that it was scratched out, but it was still showing as a total. That was all.
Yeah. And
okay.
So the county's reassessing this right now because I think there's a cheaper way to do this instead of 85 grand, which we agree. For our perspective, the security system's working fine. We don't have any complaints.
So within the spreadsheet, any of the ones that are crossed out, administration is recommending to cancel the project. As Chris has mentioned, the county is saying that probably not going to be doing that project. Some of the other ones that we have are crossed out. We have the emergency notification project that was just above line 10, where we had a carryover of 259,000. Administration's recommending that we don't do this right now, and we're going to bring it back in 2022. No point tying up our funding right now. The next one on this list where we had it crossed out was the Emerson Lake irrigation, and we said that possibly that was $85,000 in new money for 2021, but administration right now is saying that we're thinking that this is not one of our priorities, and this is where we're looking for council to come back and say this needs to be done or this does not need to be done. Same thing with our Bob Snodgrass Recreation Energy Optimization. We have an opportunity to get a grant for about $750,000 over 3 years. And we're just looking at it. Basically, we've done a study, and Riley, please jump in where you feel free to, on some of the money that we would save, but also looking at our human capacity. Is this doable at this point?
Thank you, Leanna.
Chris and Leanna, a couple of things that I need for my little ongoing every year spreadsheet. In this budget, currently we have COLA at 0, right?
Correct.
Step increases, what is there a percentage that we have?
We have, if the steps proceed with no COLA, it's a $129,000 impact.
Just step.
Just step.
Okay. Now, into our reserves. I always track infrastructure reinvestment fund. Usually that's about a 1%, and the utility and the pool. Are we putting anything into that pool reserve this year? If I remember right, the answer is no.
No, not at this point.
Okay. And utility reserves?
We are putting in, I believe it's
2% as it was before?
basically,
Right.
Chris had the number of what we're putting into utility reserves.
Yeah, 2.7 or $2.1 million is going to the utility reserves for 2021.
Okay.
So
And the infrastructure reserve?
Nothing.
0. Okay. And now our residential commercial ratio, is that still at 1 to 1.35?
Correct. We haven't changed anything.
That hasn't changed, right? We keep things status from last year. Okay. No, that's what those were my missing gaps on my sheet. Thank you. Any other questions from anybody? Info you need for your next week of thinking? When are we meeting again? Monday, right? Go over
Monday,
this?
yeah. 8 a.m. Unfortunately, sorry, it's early.
Okay.
And we'll have community groups, sliding them at 9 o'clock. So
Okay.
we'll have those go from 9 until probably about 11.
I might have Kathy running that meeting. Not like it takes much on here, but I may have a 4-month-old strapped to my chest at that time of day. So, but she can
I'm
chime
afraid
in.
it would be me, Craig.
No, I cannot have you strapped to my chest.
No, I don't want to be strapped to your chest. I was just saying it might be me instead of Kathy, since I think the
We've done that before.
deputy mayor switches. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can't have you strapped to my chest again.
Again.
Oh, we're trying to cross a river, right? And we've lost the meeting. So
Where's that first slide, right?
yeah.
I think we're in the pool now.
Okay, anything else? Anybody raise your hand if you got something or chime in? Otherwise, I will adjourn today's meeting. Good to go. Very well done. I want to thank Chris and Leanna both a ton for all the work that goes into this. It's not easy, even a little town of 14,000 people, the amount that it takes to run this show is extraordinary. And Chris, I really like your approach to this in number one, providing a balanced budget with 0% tax increase, and then leaving that choice up to council. It's been very difficult, not very difficult in the past, I guess uncomfortable in the past, where we get presented with a 3 or 4 or 5% increase in a budget, and then we have to try to rewind that to what's palatable for council. It's very hard to do that. It's much easier to have a 0%, and then we can make decisions on these new initiatives and decide what that looks like for our tax increase. If we're up for it. I also like the fact that you're using real numbers and using our revenue stream from last year, and not doing a provincial budget where you've got fake revenue coming in and hopeful revenue coming in, and they all do it. But this is real. This is the revenue that we know we have to work with, and this is what we should be building our budget on. And the other thing is that I made a note of is some of the agreements that we've got coming up with the MD that are not signed yet. You haven't added those in, which is very smart in my mind. We'll deal with them as they come available, but we're dealing with what we have in front of us. It's a real budget. And I can trust it. I can understand it very easily without having to figure out where such and such a number is coming from. So you guys did an excellent job today. Thanks to council for all your questions, and we'll see you on Monday.
Thank you all.
All good. Meeting adjourned, 3:47. Thanks, everybody.